Welcome, friends. It's early morning here. Someone recently asked, would I tell you if it was afternoon or morning? And the answer is yes. I've admitted that before in some of my earlier videos, but lately it's always been nighttime because I make these videos after sending my kids off to bed and before I settle down. The information that was released about the upcoming sentencing for Josh Duggar includes several letters from friends and family asking for leniency for Josh. Yesterday, I reviewed the letter sent from Josh's mom, Michelle. That letter made me very sad, and I thought about what Michelle's life must be like. I am questioning whether or not Michelle even wrote the letter. It sounded completely cold and removed from the situation. I was grateful to see a lack of any letters from Josh's siblings. Thank goodness Jim Bob wasn't able to force them into pouring out some fake BS onto a letterhead to save Josh's neck once again. I'm kind of surprised Jessa and Ben weren't haggled into doing it. But it looks like several other people were haggled into doing some dirty work for the Duggars. I mean, I was surprised that all of the letters come from people who I would consider friends of the family or somehow in debt to Jim Bob or Michelle, not people I feel are directly linked to Josh. They are not, in my opinion, actual close friends who really want to speak out from the heart about the defendant in this case. All of these letters are created to say, hey, I'm semi-related to the Duggars, and I'm one of the few who still don't mind admitting it. They've done good things as a family. Therefore, Josh can't be all that bad, and I've seen him play and laugh with his kids before. Sometimes his family gives money away. You should give him a second chance. Thank you, the end. In my opinion, that's basically what all of these letters are saying. No crying, weeping family pleading their case for a guy they truly love and believe in. It's just so different from how I've personally seen other families react when they have a member who's been accused or convicted of SA or SM. Now, I'm sure some of this is at least partially due to the lawyers censoring what each letter writer needed to say. They likely gave them parameters and even worked to revise issues with them. But regardless, I'm still surprised, especially about the ridiculous character qualities they chose to focus on, like Josh is extremely diligent. Josh saves money. Josh gives money away. How does this relate to not doing illegal acts against women and children? How would this ensure the community was safe with the guy who SM'd his siblings and looked at terrible pictures? The letter makes me wonder if they are mostly just resigned to Josh staying in prison. Like, okay, we'll write a small, simple letter about how he's diligent to appease Jim Bob and feel like we at least did our part. Tonight, I wanted to share some additional snippets from the letters sent about Josh Duggar that I found very interesting. Then at the end, I'm going to talk about why I choose to speak about the depositions, what's going on in court, and why I feel it's okay to read some of these letters. Okay, so first, apparently, the Duggar family's female neighbor wrote a letter I found to be kind of crazy and all over the place. Clearly having barely known Josh, but feeling very much like he must be a good person because he told her he has a close relationship with Jesus. The woman's name is Nicole. She owns a goat farm that backs up to the Duggars' land, and here is an extremely interesting part of her letter. Nicole writes, in fact, I was at Anna's house on a Saturday night a few weeks ago when Joshua called. He devastatingly shared that there was a man who was verbally threatening and abusive to him every time he passed his cell in solitary confinement. Joshua was discouraged and prayerful, but just days later, the man approached him to apologize. This hardened criminal stated that he and other men knew that Joshua was innocent. As inmates, they recognized that sometimes innocent men are in prison, and they were so stunned by Joshua's character that they were convinced of his innocence. Okay, friends, I'm willing to bank on the fact that this likely didn't happen. And I'm sure Nicole didn't make it up, which makes me think Josh is continuing to lie to Anna and anyone who will listen to him from prison. Also, it points out that Josh is still continually calling Anna, and I think it's extremely sad to know he's putting his own hardships on her, like telling her about how all the other inmates act and how they may be abusive to each other. And no, Josh, no one honestly came up to you in prison and said they believed you were innocent unless they were trying to get you to confess to them or do something illegal like smuggle drugs in, something like that. Josh lives in a sad, sad fantasy world where he is not just a loser with no job, no prestige, no ability to care for his family. He always has to lie to everyone around him so that he doesn't have to face what his life has really become. Now, I want to take a minute to address some serious allegations. David Waller of the Waller family, Anna Duggar's brother-in-law, wrote a letter asking for leniency for Josh. I wasn't surprised by this, but I was surprised when a former IBLP Bill Gothard follower came forward and responded on her blog to David. I follow Emily at Thriving Forward, who you can follow on Facebook. And she states that she was raised in a fundamentalist patriarchal cult for 23 years and dealt with inappropriate behavior in her home. She had this to say on her blog in response to reading David's letter in support of Josh. Ah, yes, David Waller. David is Anna Duggar's brother-in-law and recently wrote a letter to the judge who is going to sentence Josh Duggar soon, and he asked for leniency. David also happens to be the man who sat nearby and literally watched Bill Gothard groom me for a week when I was a teenager. Bill would have me up in his office late at night grooming me, and David would also be sitting on the other side of the room saying nothing. He also helped Bill formulate ideas on how to convince me to stay at headquarters long term. If you want to know more about Bill Gothard, the IBLP, if you're confused, I have several other videos that I've done that talk about the allegations towards Bill Gothard and what some of these women like Emily have had to say about what he did to them at IBLP headquarters. So, of course, I was really saddened and shocked to see this allegation towards David Waller. I've never seen any other allegations towards him, and I talk about that in my video about the Wallers, about David and his wife, Priscilla. But I think it's important to highlight this in my video, that Emily is claiming David supported or ignored Bill Gothard in his inappropriate conduct towards young women. I'm going to go ahead and read David's letter at this time. Dear Judge Timothy L. Brooks, as the senior pastor of Fair Park Baptist Church, and this is the job that David Waller just recently took on after leaving ATI and the IBLP, and as the brother-in-law to Joshua Duggar, I would like you to know that I have met and talked and prayed with Joshua Duggar, his precious wife Anna Duggar, and each of their children for many hours. I believe you should carefully consider the many factors that affect the discretion you retain in your power as you set the sentence for Joshua Duggar. Joshua Duggar is a friend and my brother-in-law for the past 10 years. We have spent a considerable amount of time together through family holidays, vacations, working together, and doing projects to help and serve needy people. Here are a few examples. It was Joshua Duggar who offered to help me finish a large deck project for our in-laws, giving his time and money during Christmas week to complete a large deck with a handicap accessible ramp. It was his generosity and personal initiative that designed the cable railing system for the deck to keep everyone safe and allow wheelchair access to the Keller family's double-wide trailer home. It was the next year that it was Josh Duggar's generosity and kindness that purchased and installed new appliances for his in-laws. It was Joshua Duggar that sponsored an automatic gate closer for the entrance to their home. It was Joshua Duggar's kindness and generosity that has allowed me to purchase vehicles at his cost, including a Honda Pilot that my wife and I enjoyed driving for a number of years as our family vehicle. It was Joshua Duggar that went out and spent several $100s to decorate and organize our laundry room to make it efficient and beautiful. It was Joshua Duggar who personally donated $2,000 a month for the past number of years to support a struggling and needy widow raising her children. It was Joshua Duggar who poured out his heart to his wife and children with special effort to love, care, and serve them. Once, while my family and I were taking a road trip with Joshua Duggar and his family, I observed one of his children misbehaving. I listened as Joshua Duggar stopped the vehicle, took his little one aside privately and lovingly, and patiently talked with his child. I was in awe at the tone and love he showed. On a number of occasions, I have been in Joshua Duggar's home for an overnight visit. I have observed him gather his children and read to them from the Holy Scriptures, the Bible, then pray, and then have a beautiful time singing songs about Jesus while playing the piano. In Joshua Duggar's recent absence, I have enjoyed taking some of his boys to a Christian retreat for fathers and sons. I have prayed with his boys while tucking them into bed. I have heard his young sons pray for you, Judge, by name, asking God to work in your heart so their daddy could be home soon. I have also heard them cry themselves to sleep wanting their daddy to be home. I remember this past Christmas, their request, all I want for Christmas is my daddy. I have personally observed Josh Duggar being a man of integrity and take considerable loss after selling a vehicle to a friend of mine at his cost. When the transmission went out of the vehicle a few months later, he went above and beyond the call of duty and replaced the transmission free of charge, even though he lost over $1,000 to do so. Josh Duggar is a deeply religious and God-fearing man. He lives his life knowing that he will give an account someday to God for the choices and decisions he makes. He has publicly owned many mistakes and has been transparent about his faults, even when he knows that he will be misunderstood, maligned, and attacked. He has also chosen not to own something he claims he has not done. I sat through much of the trial and listened intently to the arguments made by both the defense and the prosecution. I was there when the verdict was read. As a pastor who cares about the spiritual condition of people, I urge you to consider how much his wife and 7 children need him in their lives, to be nearby for visits, accessible for communication, and brought back home to provide not just the financial but spiritual guidance for his family. Sincerely, David Waller, pastor, Fair Park Baptist Church. So here we have David Waller, the former head of ATI, writing for leniency for Josh. I do think the letter is mainly about how Anna and his kids need their father. I don't know if the father they really need is Josh. Again, most of the positive things David has to say about Josh are mainly financial. Like, okay, over the 10 plus years you've known him, he once built a deck and bought some stuff for his in-laws, and also for a widow who is a friend of the family. That's not shocking or stunning or overly special for 10 years as his brother-in-law. Again, we have yet to really see someone who is able to address Josh taking any real accountability or being able to make changes and understand how his actions affect others. Also, I don't feel like what people are bringing up about Josh comes off as overly giving, kind, or loving. That's just my opinion. I find it interesting that they keep bringing up the same things, like he gave some money to a widow. We understand that this is something he's supposedly been doing for a period of time, but where's that money even coming from is one question I have, because he did lose his job several years ago in DC. He came back to Springdale and essentially works for his father. So isn't that money coming really from Jim Bob? I definitely don't see Josh as accepting any responsibility for what happened at the car lot, and the letters seem to indicate that many people around him believe him. This doesn't bode well for how he'll behave once being released, in my opinion. Also, it's unfortunate to hear about what Emily has to say about David Waller. Can David really be a good judge of character when he sat silently as Bill Gothard was inappropriate with many women at the IBLP Center? Okay, there are several more letters, but I'm not going to address them here in this video. Instead, I want to take a little bit of time to address why I feel it's appropriate to put these letters out on my videos and talk about what's going on with the Duggars. I want to address this because someone I really like and admire on YouTube made a video about how we shouldn't be covering certain things about the Josh Duggar scandal. Specifically, she talked about Kaylee Holt. She argued that Kaylee Holt's deposition should not have been shared and read aloud online. I read a lot of Kaylee Holt's deposition in one of my videos a few days ago. I listened to this YouTuber's feelings, and I want to say this in return. Honestly, I wish that none of this had ever happened with the Duggar family. It is so sad that the initial leak of the sisters being identified as Josh's victims ever occurred. Back then, I felt horrified for them, and I was disturbed by everything that came out. I was angry at our system that it didn't protect them better. But since then, let's be honest, all of this information has become public knowledge and part of our public rhetoric about the Duggars. That was made even more extreme by the testimony at Josh's trial, and specifically the testimony of family friends like Clint and Bobby Holt. Kaylee Holt, as far as I know, was not abused in any way by Josh Duggar. Her deposition is mainly about the church's response to what happened with Josh. It's also about how sad all of it made her. I felt this specific deposition was super important to the story and knowing the truth about how the Duggars and the IBLP operate. Kaylee's words were all about how the adults responded to Josh's problems. For me, it made it ever more clear that the adults were really inappropriate in the way they handled things with Josh. Also, the deposition makes it more clear than ever that the community supported an environment of secrecy. And this is what is really important to talk about. Kaylee even stated that she felt blamed for what happened with Josh. That's important to acknowledge and be aware of how the IBLP operates. Kaylee did nothing wrong in any way, shape, or form. I read directly from her deposition because I thought it was better to present her facts and words exactly as she gave them rather than my own opinions about those words. I chose not to talk about what the Duggar girls had to say about their family and the psychological issues following Josh's scandal because I personally felt uncomfortable talking about that. Maybe some would say I chose the wrong topic to talk about, but here's what I have to say to that. I worked for a long time with child S offenders, and I have been the nurse many times to child victims as they come into the emergency room and need a safe nurse to help catalog all the evidence of what happened to them. I am not afraid or ashamed to talk about SM or SA. I actually think talking about it openly is an important step our society needs to take to be able to battle and educate these issues more thoroughly. Yes, it's important to keep anonymity for victims at all times, but again, for Josh Duggar, everything was made public and is part of our rhetoric, whether we wanted it to be or not. I've noticed some channels are now saying, I'm not going to talk about this or that when it comes to the Duggars. That's fine and good, and everyone should do what they feel comfortable with. But I sort of wonder, why? Why now? All of this information is public now. The cat is out of the bag. Let's talk about it. We can talk about it with kindness and understanding and respect for those who were victimized. The reality, and I've spoken about this before, is I loved the Duggars show. I was so impressed with them. I wondered why I and many people around me couldn't be more like them. I wished I could model a family around how loving and involved those parents seemed to be on the show. I understand many weren't fooled by this, but I was. And guess what? A lot of people have written to me and said they were too. I'm not the only one. And guess what else? It's finally fully coming out that all of that was fake. Fake, 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 fake. It was fake. And it's important to talk about that. It's important to acknowledge all of this. Not everyone is as interested in it as I am, and that's probably healthier for them. But I'm okay to admit I see nothing wrong with going down this rabbit hole. I want to know the truth. I'm not here to expose or explode a CULT. Even if everyone in the IBLP left the IBLP, it's likely they would just form another group like the IBLP, because it's not the IBLP that's just the problem. It's the mindset of the people who join it. The poverty these people are facing that makes them feel this is the only way to live. The lack of education, the loneliness, the isolation, the environment. This isn't going away, but I want to talk about it. Why does it happen? What's going on? Let's talk about the truth. That's what I'm doing here. It's okay if you disagree. It's okay not to like my channel. I live a million miles away from most of you. I don't have many people I can talk to about my interest in this topic. No one here has ever heard about the Duggars. So I do my little channel, and I'm grateful to all of you who've watched and commented and sent me emails and chatted back and forth with me. One more week until sentencing. We are almost there.